I'm Frank Vaughn. It's November 4th, 2025. We're going to begin today by talking about my own place of residence, Saskatchewan, making headlines for all the wrong reasons with international implications. Now, I've talked about this on Twitter, but man, have I wanted to talk about this on YouTube. The headline is SaskPower paid Starlink more than $100,000 in 2024-25 documents show. The scandal should be how low those payments are. We should be spending a lot more on Starlink because it delivers services. Now, this is CTV headline news. What's it based on? Speaking to reporters following question period, NDP MLA Erica Ritchie highlighted a particular supplier expense listed under SaskPower, $114,000 to Starlink. At a time when we're in the middle of a trade war with the United States, why do we have payments going to allies and supporters of the Trump administration as if Elon Musk and Donald Trump didn't have a very public falling out, and as if Elon Musk hasn't expressed his ongoing frustration with the fact that the deficit has not been tackled and DOGE has been largely ineffective in its mission? The NDP wants you to know that they're best buds. We know that we have a world-class crown corporation, SaskTel, that offers connectivity services. We're wondering why this crown has elected to go to a foreign company to receive services, because SaskTel doesn't reach everywhere. SaskTel doesn't reach where I live, and I am not that far from civilization. It's because Starlink works. After all of the years and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, indeed, given out to rural internet providers, mainly ExploreNet, which is basically barn internet, and Bell and Rogers, soaking up all the connectivity money, they haven't delivered exactly world-class internet services. In fact, the NDP, thank God they're irrelevant. Thank God nobody's paying attention to what they're saying at a national level, because if they did, it would be deeply embarrassing. But they know that this plays to the people in Regina and Saskatoon, which is their base. People who are, it seems the closer you get to a city center, the more disconnected people get from reality. The reality is we don't have the service. The headline here is Telesat Lightspeed. Canada, Quebec give billions of dollars for satellite production. Again, Quebec wins. Telesat. The Canadian government on Friday announced a loan of $2.14 billion to satellite operator Telesat to help the company build its broadband satellite constellation. Now, mind you, this is back a year ago in 2024, a little over a year ago, and Quebec committed $400 million to the company too. Do you know how many satellites they've launched? Zero. Nothing. It's still in the concept phase, and they will probably have to hire Elon Musk to get their satellites into space. This should be the headline that CTV is concerned about, but instead they're giving all of this copy to the NDP, who are struggling for relevance. Now, it's no surprise. Carla Beck, who I've talked about in the past, this is the premier in waiting in Saskatchewan. If Scott Moe and the Saskatchewan Party don't get strong and get bold and get moving very quickly, the threat is there in spite of the last election's outcome, with 52% of people voting for the Sask Party. It might have been closer to 53, and only 41 or 42 voting for the NDP. A couple thousand votes in Prince Albert and Moose Jaw, and we got an NDP majority government elected by a minority of the population. That's how much danger we're in here in Saskatchewan. But Carla Beck, the headline is, this was 9 days ago, but Sask NDP want U.S. liquor pulled after Trump halts trade talks. And again, CTV doesn't tell you why. It has to do with Doug Ford running ads in the United States to interfere in their internal politics, which is itself a violation of the USMCA. I've made this point online that it's another violation of USMCA. And of course, I see a lot of people posting underneath the post saying, Grok, is this true? And Grok says, no, it's not true. But if you had a conversation with Grok, because Grok is an AI tool, and you pointed out how it could be interfering in the elections of the United States, Grok will then agree with you, because Grok is a tool. If you're saying, hello, Grok, is this true? You're not using it right. The question you should always be asking Grok is, are you the arbiter of truth? And Grok itself will deny that it's the arbiter of truth. We're doing everything we can to inflame the United States. Now, I don't expect the NDP to understand basic economics. They're not very good with it to begin with, but we do our business in Saskatchewan with the United States. We don't do it with Eastern Canada. We have a very dependent relationship, a very good relationship, a very well-structured trading relationship with the United States. But ever since this elbows up nonsense has started, Carla Beck has been talking like she works for the federal government, as though she didn't run in the provincial government, making her priority Canada and signaling about Saskatchewan ever being a part of Canada and being Canada first. And if that's how she feels, she should have ran for federal politics. Her job is to put the people of Saskatchewan first. And you know who's always treated us better than Team Canada? Team United States. Here's an example of what Team Canada exports to the rest of this country, or the few provinces, or the 2 provinces in this country that have any common sense whatsoever. Ontario spends nearly $500 million to push DEI and race ideology in schools. We're being outflanked because BC is doing the same thing. And this is why this stuff is starting to make inroads in Saskatchewan right now through the heart of darkness, which is Regina, where the seat of this thought in Saskatchewan is Regina. This is where the gender unicorn nonsense is emanating from. This is where it lands, being parachuted in from Ontario and BC. When we, and I say we because I was involved in it, when we made Doug Ford leader of the PC party and when we got him elected, he promised to end this. I had conversations with him about this, and it was a talking point and feature at the various rallies that I went and covered, was this idea that in Ontario, a convicted child sex offender wrote the sex ed curriculum that's taught to kids. A convicted pedo wrote the curriculum. And that was wrong. And Doug Ford at the time recognized it was wrong. But then he won an election, and indeed one subsequent re-election, and he decided to keep it anyway. He just backed completely off of it and is now spending $500 million on the entire gamut of features. It's not just that sex ed curriculum. It's also the DEI and the liberal nonsense that comes down from on high. This man is not a conservative in any way, shape, or form. There's never been a better time in Ontario to vote for a different party or to get involved in PC politics to make as much noise as you can to try and pull him down. But the fact is, you'll just get kicked out. People often say what we have to do is, I read some guy on Twitter, and it made my brain ache. He said that all we need to do is get rid of Doug Ford as leader of the PC party and get Caroline Mulroney in there, which will solve nothing. All of the progressive infection, the disease that is rotting Ontario, will not go away just by swapping out Ford. And again, I've said it before, you would have been better off voting Liberal in the last election because at the very least it would have been honest. He pretends to be different. He pretends to care about you. He pretends to be in opposition to the Liberal Party, and all he does is assist them. He keeps them in office, he advances their policy, and he's a slave to their ideology and is willing to spend all kinds of money that Ontario doesn't have, pushing it on your children. Now, Canada's going broke. We don't have $500 million for any of this nonsense. We don't even have $500 million for ourselves. Exactly. We have to just go and borrow it from the central bank or otherwise print it because we spend in excess in every single way. Publicly, provincially, federally, privately. We'll see that next. But here's an example of something that your media wants you worried about. You can't even check the weather anymore at the Weather Network without getting propagandized constantly. Almost 1 million Canadians have serious climate anxiety, studies suggest. Oh my goodness. It's no wonder. It's been a steady stream of propaganda for 20 years now, and for half of those years, we haven't had the right of rebuttal, and I'll get to that next. Constant propaganda about how the world is ending because of climate change. So much so, the vast majority of Canadians are completely subscribed to this net zero ideology, including Premier Smith and indeed Premier Moe. Even though they want to kick the ball out further down the horizon, they're both committed to this nonsense, carbon capture and all of this unnecessary technology, while the world is moving on from it, while the world is moving on from the nonsense of deindustrialization, while they move full speed ahead to increase their own prosperity. Canada, almost virtually alone, is committed to this deindustrialization path, while at the same time, the powers that be talk about the necessity of developing Canada and talk about pipeline projects and talk about development. But you can't suck and blow at the same time. We're not going to be able to have all the development and the resource development and all the wealth that would arise from that if we are committed to net zero. So we kind of got to pick a path. But it seems the Canadian public is content to be fed spoonfuls of propaganda claiming we can do both things at the same time. Here's another article. Iceland just lost its mosquito-free status. Here's why. You can guess it. Climate change. It's not because the mosquitoes came from somewhere else. It's not because of global trade or some other factor. It's solely down to climate change. I remember a time when you could actually debate these things. You would scroll down these articles when there was, I can't remember what year now. I'd probably really have to think about it, but we're looking back at 2013, 2014, 2015, somewhere in there, maybe 2012, somewhere in that period of time. We lost the comments section almost everywhere. It used to be a standard of the internet for you new people that maybe are coming of age that might happen to watch this. Down here, there used to always be a comment section, and there would be a lively debate. And just like it is now, we were completely outnumbered. Those of us who stood in favor of common sense, and we wanted to push back on the hyperbole, and we wanted to let everybody know that the world wasn't going to end next year if we didn't nominate Greta Thunberg, dictator of the world. We had a comment section, and we had some degree of free speech. The same thing existed on CBC. Same thing existed on CTV. Everywhere you went, BBC, there was a comment section. And then they disappeared. And ever since then, it has just been a steady stream of propaganda that is unanswered. You have to go to the town square. You have to go to Facebook. You can go there again because X exists, and you have free speech on X. So all the other platforms have had to loosen the noose for a little while. I don't know how long it will last. I believe at this time we are being built up towards another election in Canada. I believe the Liberals really want the public stamp of approval of a majority government before they unleash a draconian swarm on the Canadian people unlike anything we have ever seen before. And they're going to campaign to the right, and that's one of the flaws, as the Conservative Party has been dragged further and further to the center, trying in vain to chase those swing voters. They've left themselves out of position for a liberal pivot to the center. So we have bail reform. We now have Mark Carney talking about austerity. We have the governor of the Bank of Canada coming out and telling you Canadians that you're going to have to accept a permanently lower standard of living. That's just the latest in the crazy. This is how hypnotized the Canadian people are. Carney campaigned on a message of impending doom and disaster. He campaigned telling you, I don't know if people could hear it, the words were coming out of his mouth, but it got translated in people's heads to saving us from Donald Trump, saving us from disaster. He said tough times were ahead. He promised disaster, and the public elected him. It's still an ongoing source of fascination. And the latest chapter in that is we had the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Office, coming out and saying, look, if we don't change course, in a matter of a year, not even to 2 years, a year to 16 months, if we don't change course, the wheels are going to come off the bus, and issued a report earlier saying that we would all be subsistence living. We would be killing squirrels for food in a matter of years if the fiscal trajectory of the nation didn't change. And so now enter Carney. First off, bail reform at least threatens to put a dent in the crime problem, outmaneuvering the Conservative Party of Canada. The Liberals are likely going to try and time a deal before an election. I think that's good strategy. I think that will put Ford out of position because here's the thing about the big red machine. They don't like Doug Ford, but they're willing to have him over to the House party. They're willing to have him over for meetings. They're willing to pat him on the back and make him feel really good about himself. But time and time again, he stuck his neck out for the Liberals, for the big red machine, only to have them take a swipe at it with a scimitar. They did it. Remember when he canceled the Starlink contracts, $100 million worth of Starlink contracts? Then the very next day, the situation with the United States thawed, and he was just left looking stupid. Now, mind you, the Ontario public saw fit to re-elect him with record numbers, so I don't know. Ontario, you kind of get what you get. But I think he might be a useful tool to sacrifice. Threatening to cut off power to 1.5 million Americans, running ads on their TV, doing the most overt anti-American diplomacy you could ever imagine, aggravating our largest trading partner, setting up a position. And I mean, Poilievre's caught out too, because he has adopted a lot of the talking points of the big red machine vis-a-vis Trump. He's very adversarial. He's not blaming the liberals for destroying one of our best trading relationships and saying, I need to get on the phone with Donald Trump. We need to fix this right now. He's not saying that America is our best friend and we have to get together, do business with them. He's engaging in some elbows up lightness. But when the liberals, because they've got a herd of trained lemmings behind them. They've got a social media bot farm. They've got liberal staffers tweeting their little hearts out every single day. They have a captured mainstream media. When they decide to pivot to diplomacy, when they decide to put things back together with the United States on their terms, and there is an argument that Mark Carney and Donald Trump are colluding together towards some goal. I don't know if that's true, but there certainly seems to be some evidence pointing that way. But there's just as much evidence as to Carney trying to integrate us with Europe or make us more dependent on China. This is a very hard to read man. But if he pivots back towards the United States, if he pivots towards more diplomacy, everybody's caught out of position, and all the social media warriors and all the MSM will just move on. They will just change their script. They will update their storyline, and they will produce pro-liberal propaganda talking about the United States as our best friend and repairing relations as though they haven't spent the last year and a half getting everybody hyped up in anger. They'll dissipate it, and the majority of the Eastern public will go along with it. There's another stupid thing that Canada is involved in, and that is a universal dedication to the continuance of the Ukraine war until we've killed every single Ukrainian, let alone the Russians that are dying as well in this pointless, completely avoidable war. The headline is Russian infantry operating inside of Pokrovsk, strategic Ukrainian city fall imminent. If anybody's been following the Ukraine war, you will remember that only weeks ago, Pokrovsk, when the Russians suggested they were about to take it, everybody laughed. The media, the Ukrainian government will never happen. Well, here we are, and the situation is actually even more dangerous than that. Putin invites journalists to watch thousands of trapped Ukrainian troops in an encircled zone. Now, why would Vladimir Putin do this? He's willing to pause the conflict to showcase to Western journalists what the situation is on the ground. And the reason he's doing this is because, well, the Ukrainian government and the mainstream media just lie. They just run propaganda as it comes to the Ukrainian war. Any idea that the Ukrainians can actually win this thing in any fruitful way is delusional. There's no way to do it. Western troops can't do it because if Western troops get involved directly, it becomes the biggest war this planet has ever seen. So it can't happen. It just can't happen. Weaponry won't reverse the fortunes of the Ukrainian people. It won't reverse the fortunes of the Ukrainian army because they are at a manpower deficit. With all the aid that's flowing in, they're still experiencing crippled short supplies in vital munitions, and the Russians are not. They have converted to a war economy, and they're doing just fine. Now, Ukraine's defense has largely been generating headlines in Western media. That's what they do with their military assets now. They fly these long-range raids into Russia that make for splashy headlines all over Western media and feed the absolutely demonic urges of the Lindsey Grahams of the world who just want to destroy everybody. They just want to kill everybody. They salivate at it. They just recently had this Zionist forum of the Republican Party, and they're just openly calling for the killing of every single Palestinian, and they're salivating, and they love it, and they're applauding, and it's demonic. It's demonic. But anyway, the Ukrainians just lie. They lie about everything. Now, the Russians, I don't think that they would be any less loose with the truth if the shoe was on the other foot. If they were actually losing the war, I think they would behave in much the same way. The issue is they don't have to pretend. They don't have to lie. So if you know where to look This is just one of the many channels. Now, I just want to highlight this map. Maybe we'll watch a little bit of the channel. Yeah, we'll watch a little bit. This is just one of many channels where you can actually watch the war updated in real time. You can watch it from the Ukrainian perspective. You can watch it from the Russian perspective. And if you're really morbid or you're really interested in the back and forth that goes on every single day, you can actually watch the battles, because every one of these drones, we're going to look back on this period in time, and this war in particular, as the first drone war. This is the first big, real, fully fleshed drone war. It's going to look primitive, extremely primitive in the rearview mirror when it's all over with. We're going to look back on this like flip phones are looked back on now by smartphone enthusiasts. This is the first real drone war. Every single drone has a camera, or thereabouts. Every single, I don't know if I've seen drone footage where there isn't multiple angles on it, because there's the drones doing the incursions, and then there's the drones watching it happen. And then it's broadcast on the internet. So the other day, Ukraine attempted a special forces operation to try and disrupt Russian lines, where they sent in low-level flying helicopters and they dropped a bunch of men off. They all just got slaughtered. To the man, every last one of them got killed. It was such a waste of human life. And this is what the Ukrainians are down to. The Western media does not cover it, does not cover the senseless throwing away of thousands of lives every single day in a fruitless effort to continue this war for European machinations. The Ukrainian people don't even want this war. Support for the war has never been lower within Ukraine. And dare I say, I actually think I'm seeing hints. Again, I seen hints earlier on a few months ago, but seeing hints in Western media, I don't think I have it. Well, here's that special forces operation, and I don't think the video's included, but I went and I found the video where you can actually watch the thing get disrupted. But they just spent their the headline is Ukraine sends special forces to bolster nearly surrounded troops in Pokrovsk, but doesn't go far enough because all of them got slaughtered, every last one of them, and it's so tragic. It's so pointless. But at any rate, that's why Putin is being open. So when the Russians, which happens every single day, capture a new territory, they film it and they put it online. And you could say it's AI and you could say it's all BS and all this stuff. It's not. The Russians don't have a need to lie, because the front line is moving ever more every single day into Ukraine. It's inexorable. It's an advance. And they're preparing with the surroundings. So Pokrovsk has fallen. Let's just watch some of what you can get from alternative media sources, because it should just provide a contrast and make you understand that the mainstream media, whether it's old school digital newspapers or CNN or Fox News or CBC or CTV, they're all propagandists. They're lying to you. And if you want to find out what's actually happening in the world, the internet's the only place in town. There's a lot of misinformation out there. But if you got half a brain, you only need half, maybe even a quarter. If you got half a brain at least that works, you can discern reality from fakery, because there's a lot of fakery out there. But the quality of reportage is so much better. Let's watch.
So friends, the situation in Pokrovsk continues to develop rapidly, and not only in Pokrovsk, but also in Mirnohrad, where the Russian army achieved another breakthrough, managing to enter the central southern part of the city. And not just enter, but literally drive in on armored vehicles. Imagine that. Russian local command is often criticized for moving in columns on armor, but here they managed to drive an armored convoy straight into the southern center of the city. They rolled in, dropped off an assault group, and that group began clearing house by house. And this isn't some tale or exaggeration. There's actual footage showing Russian armored vehicles moving in, dismounting troops, and the infantry clearing residential buildings in the area of Sanaya Street and Hliboki Lane in southern Mirnohrad. What does this indicate? Not just progress, but the fact that Russian troops were able to enter on armor and withdraw safely without the vehicle being hit, shows that Ukrainian forces are struggling even with drone control, let alone direct fire control. That means the defense of Mirnohrad has effectively collapsed. And why? Because things are going extremely badly for Ukrainian forces in Pokrovsk. The city is rapidly falling under Russian control at incredible speed. Look at the map. Over the past 24 hours, roughly speaking, we've seen a complete collapse of the defense line. The entire central part of Pokrovsk, everything up to the railway, is now under full and stable Russian control. The Biop central zone with the church, where Ukrainian troops held out for more than a week in isolation, has finally been cleared. But without supply lines, they simply couldn't last.
The only thing that I want you to get out of that is that this is the quality of daily reportage from the Ukrainian front line and from the internet. And this is not the only channel that covers this. And there is a consensus among those channels, even pro-Ukrainian channels, pro-Russian channels, if you want to call that, but judging by the comment section, the consensus is Ukraine is losing the war. Now, when it comes to Pokrovsk, this town that was never supposed to fall, it has fallen. Thousands of Ukrainian troops are surrendering without permission from command. Two fronts are about to join up. And the Russian general offensive, in my estimation, is only a month to 2 months away. They're going to go big. They're going to take a lot of territory, and it's going to wake up the world to what's actually happening in Ukraine and how precarious the situation is. Every single day, all along the front, the Russians are landing victories, and Ukraine is just throwing away the flower of their youth in this pointless war that never needed to happen. Further to Ukraine, let's talk about Turkey for a minute, and indeed China, and indeed India. I could do a whole segment on Turkey. I've been intending to for weeks, and I just haven't got there yet. But Turkey ships more Russian oil to Europe than India, energy expert rips Trump's tariff logic. So Turkey, I've always said, is the knife in NATO's underbelly. They are doing what they've always done, which is playing the center of the world, which is basically what they are. It might surprise you that it's not Washington, D.C. No, it is Ankara, it is Istanbul, it is Turkey, and they play everybody off against each other. This is the same Turkey that used refugees as a bludgeon. I have the article up here somewhere, but they opened the... Further on this subject, we need to talk about Turkey and India and China and their purchases of Russian oil. The headline is Turkey ships more Russian oil to Europe than India. Energy expert rips Trump's tariff logic. Setting that aside for a minute, that is the truth. That even though there's all of these sanctions and embargoes and theater, the Europeans are still buying Russian oil because they need Russian oil. I made this point in yesterday's video that the sooner we get the war done with and the sooner we start dealing with the geopolitical realities, not just of Canada and the United States being beside each other, but Russia and their oil fields being right next to the Europeans who desperately need that energy. It's been this way since we started the internal combustion engine. The Germans, before they went to war with the Soviets, relied for their war machine back in the early part of the Second World War and the buildup. They relied on Soviet energy and resources to get their army built. You see, the resources themselves don't care what their end use is. So you can bend them to nefarious purposes or you can bend them to prosper. And Europe was better off before they decided they had to fight Russia over Ukraine. Now, at any rate, I've always described Turkey as the dagger in NATO's belly because they have issues with Israel. It's funny because Israel bombed Qatar, and Qatar is building its own military facilities in the United States. We'll cover that in another video. So there's cross purposes there. Israel doesn't like Turkey because of their machinations in Syria, also doesn't like Turkey because of their support for Hamas and their support for Palestine. So there's friction there. There is a scenario where Turkish troops get involved directly, kinetically with Israeli troops, and it triggers a NATO response. Maybe not kinetic or military, but actually triggers some kind of diplomatic problem because these tensions are building. And it's the same when it comes to a disconnect between what what Europe's trying to do with at least some U.S. cooperation, full Canadian cooperation, and our blind spot when it comes to what Turkey's doing with Russian energy. Turkey's this great big blind spot. But at any rate, I didn't want to talk about that today. What I wanted to talk about is the fact that I thought it was too late for U.S. pressure to exert itself in such a way that it could force a temporary, and that's what it is, it's a temporary pause on the decline of American power, which is an ongoing process. As we head towards this multipolar world, U.S. hegemony breaks more and more away and becomes visible as the paper tiger it is, because the United States cannot possibly police the entire world at this stage of the game. However, they have managed to force China to reduce their oil imports from Russia. They have managed to force the Indians to do the same. And even Turkey has made some limited concessions. How Turkey became Putin's pit stop for selling camouflage fuel to the EU. So they just kind of went around the sanctions. Even the EU, who is pressing for this prosecution of this war, are still buying Russian oil. And they're just doing it in a duplicitous way where they think they can fool the public. Maybe they're right. Russian oil imports to Turkey fall as Trump seeks to cut Moscow's earnings. Trump's pressure is actually working on China and India and Turkey. And one of the concessions that came out of the recent negotiations when it comes to China is on something very important to Trump, which is the cutting of the precursor materials that make fentanyl, which has killed 600,000 Americans, to the cartels in Mexico and indeed to Canada. It's a two-way street here. And the Trump administration is winning these concessions, which may dry up the drug supply. And this just goes towards my thesis that as the world adjusts to the resurgent American idea, as they try to extricate themselves from these imperial wars and focus their efforts on defining what the Western Hemisphere and Fortress North America is going to look like, that's the kind of neo-American thinking. That's the next new world order, if you will. Forgive me for using that term. As they try to focus and concentrate on that and figure out how to extricate themselves from the world, Canada is just married to an old, outdated idea of global affairs, which is EU-centric. We're going to be and are way out of position. And at some point, it's going to lead to a capitulation to the United States, and I am sure the big red machine and the mainstream media are going to spin it as a victory, even though it's going to leave us worse off than we were before in terms of sovereignty. They'll somehow gaslight us into believing that they've somehow saved Canada, but I digress yet again. And there, I finally said it this video. I try to say it once a video, at least for everybody. I think the Russians... And I don't think it shakes them much, but I do believe they have the winning hand in Ukraine, so they can afford to keep the thing going. The Americans' position seems to be, we're totally willing to still ship in weapons, but they're going to have to be purchased by the European governments. We're not paying for them anymore, so we're willing to make money continuing the war that you guys are desperate to prosecute and continue, but we don't really want to get directly involved. I think that's the message. And the Russians can afford to keep grinding away because they have superior manpower and they have superior weaponry and they are making advances every single day. I think the unexpected thing is that, at least for me, is that India and China, and to a lesser degree Turkey, aren't quite willing yet to pull the trigger on dethroning the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. They're not quite there yet. And maybe it's just a matter of they're able to play a longer game by merit of how their countries are structured. So if it would be far more painful now to pull the trigger on the ultimate plan, which is to create this other settlement layer and to expand BRICS and do all the things that they're trying to do, they can afford to wait for a year till the midterms are done, or 2-3 years until the next presidential election. They can afford to wait and bide their time and keep filling their coffers with silver and gold. They can keep building the infrastructure. They can keep slowly taking over Africa and making inroads. They can afford to take their time. As the Russians are fighting a slow and gradual grind in Ukraine, winning that war, the Chinese and the Indians are fighting a slow and grinding war against the U.S. dollar. And the interesting thing is where interests align. Because in order for the United States to deal with reshoring manufacturing, and the crippling poverty they have in many places. They have to start making things again, and in order to start making things again, they have to devalue the dollar. They have to shrink from their role as the world's reserve currency, and they've got to bring capital back. They've got to bring manufacturing back. So I think, people are always looking for a silver lining, and maybe this one's a bit all over the place. I'm sure it is. It always is. As I try to communicate 6 things at the same time, probably fail miserably. But there is a dovetailing of purpose. There's an alignment of objectives, which I think in the short term and in the medium term actually increases the chances that we can extricate ourselves from these crises. It doesn't mean we can stop pain, economic pain, and the restructuring pain. I think that is inevitable. I think there's going to be a lot of pain, but instead of it just being blind pain pursuing old ideas down into the drain, it will be pain in terms of building something newer and better, which is what I'd really want to engage with. And my concern, and I'll finish with this, is that Canada is so far out of position. I don't even think we're on the same page. I don't even think we understand what multipolarity looks like. I don't think we understand the game of houses that's going on at a global level. It's like we're a confused bystander, just jumping up and down on the side, like we're a confused bystander who is bewildered by what we see happening in the world, and we're just jumping up and down trying to get everybody's attention. And we're incredibly lucky that we're not getting more of that attention, because if we did, the world might actually figure out what Canada has become underneath the hood. At any rate, this has been long enough. I'm Frank Vaughn. If you enjoy the work, please support it via the website. I'll see you in the next one. Did you know that I have a website? frankvaughn.ca, the ultimate repository for all of my work, and a backup location just in case the censors come for me again. And if you like the content, please consider using the donate link in one of the options available. There are no paywalls, there is no advertising, and there is no Patreon, and I intend to keep it that way. Thank you for your time and your consideration.